I am truly excited to introduce you to my guest today. Her design philosophy is completely aligned with mine, but her approach to implementing it is unique to her. Olga Naiman has just written a book all about her philosophy called Spatial Alchemy. In it, she takes us deep into the connection between our psyche and the environments that we've created to live in every day. She talks about how things like self worth or feeling scattered or lost manifest themselves in our homes and how to use design to break patterns that we've outgrown. It's heady stuff, but these are the kinds of conversations that really are my favorite. We're asking and answering the question, why does style matter in our homes? And I think Olga would agree with me that when I say style, I mean a highly personalized signature style coming from within yourself. Here's Olga. Olga Naiman, welcome to the Slow Style Home podcast. It is wonderful to have you here.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
This book is, and we were just talking before we started recording, but this is in the top five of my all-time favorite design books. It is called Spatial Alchemy. We're going to get into what that means in a minute, but I just want to say to everyone listening or watching, I can't recommend this book enough. It's weighty. Soul searching is going to happen when you go through this book. It's not a sit down in one day and flip through it kind of thing. It's meaty. There's a lot to up, and I'm just fully in love. So I'm just gushing a bit. I want you to tell us the story of how it all started. And by it, I mean this whole design philosophy and approach, spatial alchemy. You were recovering some cushions. Why were you compelled to do this project? And then what happened?
I had been an interior designer for a little while before I came up with the term spatial alchemy. I was doing interior design that brought in people's future selves. I grew up in a home where psychological wellness was key, and we would always speak about it. So that is really the lens through which I see home. How does it affect your psyche? So I would be really working deeply with my clients to release unwanted patterns out of their homes, to plant seeds of new patterns. When the pandemic came about, my first spatial alchemy client per se was myself,
Okay.
because I was living in a lot of scarcity. I was petrified. All my styling jobs had gone away. I was not making any money. I was in the middle of building a house. I had just bought a house. I was renting and building at the same
Oh,
time. So a lot of expenses. So
yeah.
I was in a place of fear. All my immigrant refugee trauma was coming up.
Because you
And
have your parents, did they immigrate from the Soviet Union, right?
yeah, Soviet Union,
Yeah.
Ukraine specifically.
Okay. Oh,
So in the 1970s, we came here and we didn't have any money. And
I can't even imagine.
I
Yeah.
grew up in that scarcity environment. I was petrified, and reupholstering the cushions, even though it's not even the cushions, it was actually the furniture. It was a
Oh,
sofa,
okay.
it was a chair, the stuffing was coming out of it. But I was holding on and not redoing them because we were building a new house, and I was thinking, I'm going to reupholster it when I get to the new house. But I
Yep.
knew that was going to be years away. So every
Yep.
time I looked at this upholstery in my house, my heart would sink. But at the same time, I would hear my father's voice, and he would say, you don't know what if food is going to be scarce. So you can't spend it on stupid stuff like string your furniture. Who cares about that? And so I lived like that for months, like in a lot of fear. And then I took the jump and reupholstered the furniture because I couldn't take it anymore. My heart just was longing for beauty. And some fascinating things happened. Prior to the pandemic shutting down all my styling jobs, I had felt very stuck in my career because I had wanted to take design deeper, but I didn't know how. I didn't know really what to call it. As soon as I redid all that upholstery, somehow my manifestation range got wider. The Washington Post did an article on my home and my process and how I work, then the book just came to me. It literally fell on my lap. I
Amazing.
hadn't been trying to become a published author. That wasn't even in my first
Vision.
my vision. It wasn't even in my vision. So I was as shocked as anyone. I was like, what did I do? There's something that I must have done that, and I want to learn, I want to look back so that I could do it again.
Yeah.
And then I realized that it really started with the cushions, letting go of my scarcity voice, letting go of those unwanted patterns that were holding me back, and just believing in the future self, which is
Yeah.
one of the key concepts of spatial alchemy. So, spatial alchemy came about after that experience when I realized it's really about refining your who you are and designing your home for the person that you're becoming. Spatial alchemy is really about pulling that future into the present moment so that every choice that you're making in terms of design can embody the energy that you want to step into. So your body becomes entrained to it. And that
Yes.
is the heart of spatial alchemy.
I say all the time about our homes reflecting where we've come from, who we are, and who we want to become. In particular, you say that self-worth is the gold that alchemists speak of. Some
Mhm.
of us may know a little bit about alchemy. If you're a Harry Potter fan, it was talked about. What is it? What do you mean when you say spatial alchemy?
Spatial alchemy is about turning the lead, the commonplace, into the most refined version of itself. We are all constantly in a process of refining ourselves. Life refines us. We can't help but do that. So, spatial alchemy is really about aligning your home with that process so that your home becomes a reflection of the person that you are becoming or the energies that you want to make real, pull out of your vision board and into the third dimension, into your everyday life. So, self worth is what plays into that.
Mm,
When you begin to see little places that you're neglecting yourself, little places that reflect unwanted patterns and outdated identities and things that you're not jiving with anymore, but they're still somehow taking up residence because you've stopped seeing them because you're
hmm.
so close, right?
Absolutely. We
We
stop seeing
all
it. We do. We stop seeing the junk. We stop seeing the clutter. We stop seeing the hazards.
Exactly, exactly. And then once you shift it, even in a little spot like a bookshelf,
Hmm?
once you begin to shift it, you realize, oh my God, that feels so much better.
Yeah,
And that is the space of self-worth. You get a dopamine hit and you start building little step by little step. And that's what the process that the book takes you through to the like routines that you do every day, upgrading everything by 10%, having the most beautiful water glass that your budget can afford, and
right,
seeing how your body responds and your self-worth responds to drinking from that water glass,
right,
having a beautiful watering can for your plants, and how your body responds and how your psyche and your self-worth responds when you water your plants with that watering can. So
right.
starting with these small things, and once you begin to clock that conversation. Okay, when I do this, I feel like this. Oh, this thing happened last week when I ran into that person, and that unexpected door opened this opportunity that I couldn't have even created for myself. Once you start linking that back to stuff that you did in your home,
Mhm.
that's when you up level your own creatorship. And
Yeah.
that's really where spatial alchemy lives. It's
I
about helping someone not only do design, but become a more conscious creator of their 3D environment and their life.
I often talk about our homes as either a laboratory or an incubator, and I think you
Mm,
have some
yes.
similar wording around that. And you have this really lovely five-step process that you lay out for us in the book. So, step one is to articulate your desires. Step two is to disrupt your old patterns. Step three is to seed new patterns. Step four is to make design decisions according to your emotional needs. And step five is to make design decisions that claim pleasure in all of its many forms. What kept coming back to me as I read through all of this is how disconnected most of us are from our own thought patterns and assumptions about ourselves and our lives and our circumstances, which then keeps us stuck in all areas of our lives. So, for example, in step one, articulate your desires. I often talk with people who they don't even know what they like. What's your favorite color? Every 5-year-old can answer that question. By the time we're 35, we stop being able to answer that question, some of us. And I think it's because people have so many years of being influenced by trends or what family and friends think or whatever that we kind of lose touch with our own inner sense of what it is we love. And so I think that's a really important foundational chapter. But I want to jump ahead to step two, which is about releasing the vision you have of yourself that's no longer serving you or just not an accurate reflection of who you are at the time. You talk about leaning into decoding your stuff. And you've got several examples of how the things that people were using and seeing every day were actually holding them back from who they wanted to become. And I want to start with an example from your own life and your office. Tell us about the things you discarded, the things that you dissolved, and what you brought in instead.
Yeah. So when I look back to my office at this time, I was in Brooklyn. I had just had children. I was renting the rec room at the base of my condo so that I could be near the third floor apartment where the nanny was with the kids
Okay.
and jump up there to breastfeed and do what I needed to do.
Yep.
So had positioned myself in the space with not in the command position. I positioned myself looking at this big wall and with free art that I'd gotten from all my styling jobs from West
And
Elm.
when you
Like
say command position, you mean your back is to the door.
and
Right.
the office was behind me, and I was sitting there looking at a wall
Yeah.
rather than the opposite way, which I would have, even if I went into that rec room space now, I would have positioned my desk so that wall was in back of me. And
Mhm.
I was like in the CEO position because then you claim the space, you own the space. So that is
Right.
one thing that I wasn't doing, wasn't aligned with my desires. And that's the key thing.
So
Like
what else was going on in that room that was out of alignment? I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were starting to talk about the free art that you had on the walls.
the free art. So I got this art from styling jobs and I put it in a gallery wall in my space. So I was looking all day long at a representation of something that I was really wanting to get out of,
Right.
right?
Yes. Yes.
So if you see the symbolism there, and this is all about the symbolism,
Yeah.
when you want to get clarity, you can't be staring at something that represents the thing that you want to leave.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want to put in front of you in your office the thing that you want to move towards, not move away from.
So then your second office, what did that look like?
I moved out of Brooklyn and into the country. I was living in a rental home. And the main thing in it was this like funky desk that I had designed for an event that I did in New York City years ago, and it had all these legs, and it's inside in the book a picture of it.
Yeah.
All these different legs that moved in all these different directions, which were perfect for the event. It looked
Yeah.
really cool and it worked in the space, but it was a representation of this scattered feeling of moving in all different directions, which is exactly how I felt in my life. Like I
Interesting.
felt like I was being scattered and overwhelmed. My nervous
Right.
system was like anxious. And then I looked at all these skinny little legs and I
Yeah.
was like, how am I bringing support into my business or the feeling of being grounded, stable, and supported when I have all these skinny legs moving in all these different directions. And as soon as
Right.
I saw that, and I literally had worked on that desk for years, not seeing it. So it's not like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
still have these aha moments even now when I'm like,
Sure.
I can't believe I didn't see that. And I got a desk with really thick legs that
Ah,
felt like how I wanted to feel in my.
right.
And that is the golden key. The thing that you work on needs to feel like you want to feel.
Hmm.
It needs to be the embodiment of how you want to feel rather than this random cool thing that you picked up from like this cool person or like the sale at CB2. So it has to be congruent with the energy that you're wanting to bring in. So I moved my desk. I put these two large pieces of art, which you actually see in back of me now. They were in my office behind me, framing me, these bold, strong pieces
Right.
that, and they basically were bigger than I was. It wasn't like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cute little things behind me. It was like really, I felt dignified, I felt stately, and it started shifting the energetics in my business. So that's what I always clock. As soon as I do that, how do I feel behind the desk? How does my body feel? How am I treating myself? For example, the office chair. In
Yes.
my first office, I had this hard plastic chair that I tried
Right.
to soften with like a sheepskin throw, but I spend 8 hours a day in
It
that
was
chair,
still uncomfortable, even though it
right?
looked a little bit better. Yeah, yeah.
It was like really uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but that's the self-worth piece. You want to really balance how your body is being treated in the chair. So the way
Right.
I say is like the chair is how you treat yourself. What's behind you is how the world perceives you, and what's in front of you is what you're moving towards. It's this
Oh,
like
love that.
three-step process for the office.
Love that. And the book is full of these kinds of examples and ways in which you can walk through your own home and really take stock of what's going on. And you also say, don't beat yourself up if you're not coming up with answers right away.
No, you could start small
Yeah.
and just see and if you begin to really work with your everyday routines, that's where I start. Don't start by spending a ton of money. Start by working with the things that you do on a daily basis and up leveling them by 10, by 20%. Thinking,
Hmm.
what is the most luxurious sponge that I can afford? The most
Hmm.
luxurious tea towel that I can afford? How do my salt and pepper shakers turn me on?
How do they
How
feel in your hands? Yeah.
these little things, but you're creating a web of higher self-worth if you
Mm.
start affecting these little things that you're interacting with every
Mm.
day. So do that first before you make the big sofa purchase.
Absolutely. And we're in alignment about that. First of all, you start without spending any money. You need to assess what's going on and spend a little time with the things that you do love that you do already own before you go out and spend anything. I want to jump into step 4, which is where I think we really get into the meat of the design approach. This is where you give us ways to connect the dots between how we want to feel, what we want to experience, and specific decor decisions. And to do this, you define for us 3 pairs of core emotional energies, you call them. I might call them emotional experiences, but you call them emotional energies, and they are stability and fluidity, activity and passivity, connection and privacy. And I think you can see already why we would need a balance of each of these things in different parts of our homes. I think that they can apply, they're universal. They would apply to anyone in any home. I'm wondering if you could share with us this wonderful story of a family in upstate New York.
Kind
Their
of
home was, by their own admission, was generic and with indeliberate furniture choices. So tell us about the different things you did and why.
So they had not really inhabited their home because they had small kids and dogs. They were worried about having their home be destroyed
Yep.
by these critters that they had running around their house. So they were in this state of not having rooted, not being able to root. And that often manifests in financial worries and just feelings of not being supported or stable in your life,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is a common story for so many of us.
Yeah.
We kind of circle around and stay stuck in the lament, and they were stuck in the lament We don't feel supported. We don't feel rooted. Our home doesn't feel like it's a home. It just feels like somewhere that we live. And they had been literally in that complaint. They'd been living like that for years.
Yeah.
So I started bringing more stability into their home by removing a lot of this mishmash furniture that they didn't even like and really started uniting the space with color and beginning to bring more stability by removing like teetering little tables that were on
Yeah.
skinny legs. For
Yep.
example, skinny legs, when you want more stability in your life, you want to start getting pieces that feel solid and grounded, that feel the way that you want to feel. And we also started working on the fluidity, balancing that, like creating systems in their home so there was not chaos. When your fluidity is not really thought through, you begin to feel overwhelmed in your home. You begin to feel scattered. Then you begin to judge yourself. And oftentimes we loop. A lot of us loop in that. Why can't I get it together? What's
Right.
wrong with me? My
Why
home
am
is
I always late?
a mess.
Yeah.
All of that stuff.
Yep.
The chapter on fluidity starts addressing how you bring more agency into the systems that are in your home.
Right,
Starts,
because you say that sometimes you need to be flexible. You're not
yes.
going to change the chaos that is working from home with kids, with dogs. So how can we be more flexible, balanced with where can we be more stable? Tell us about the solarium in their home. That I loved this part of the story.
The solarium was this kind of area that they didn't know what to do with.
Yeah.
It was this like no-go area piled with junk that they felt didn't really work in their living room. So the living room and the solarium was really one large space. So I divided it into two kinds of living rooms. One, which was the kind of warm, sunny summer living room. I put a lot of plants in there. They had terracotta tiles, which I decided it was going to be like this a Spain feeling because
Yeah.
it already had that vibe. So I got this hand painted orange, deep terracotta wallpaper with plants in it. I had this local artist create that for them. And we moved one of the sofas from their living room into that space and created a games table, which the family could gather at. There was a piano in there, there was a desk in there, and it became their favorite room in the house. Filled
Mm.
it with plants so that which were thriving. A space where your plants are thriving encourages your own thriving. It becomes magnetic. And the living room, I painted it dark. So it was like you went from this really bright and open solarium to this deep eggplant living room with a big fireplace. And it felt very Bloomsbury and with gallery walls, and it felt very cozy. So when you wanted a space where your body felt like it was receiving a hug, you went
Mhm.
into the darker space with the fireplace. When you wanted to feel more expansive, you went into the solarium. So
Yeah.
we really balanced privacy and connection in
Mm.
the.
What I loved about I believe this is the living room where they had made a bad design decision that was probably fairly expensive, and then they had bought a very large couch sectional. And that decision was probably made not connected to anything other than that maybe they're like, oh, I have a space, I need to fill it, I'll buy a sectional. And you recognize that, well, they can't really get rid of it. Or maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they didn't want it to go to a landfill, whatever, but they didn't get rid of it. You made it work by pushing it into a corner and saying, okay, let's make the whole room dark and cozy. And then you did the wallpaper that kind of what distracted from it or something.
So that was the family room. It was just a white room with a TV, a coffee table, and a big black leather sectional that
Okay.
she was really like angry at herself that she bought
Neat.
this
Oh,
sectional,
I
but she
we've
spent a
been
lot
there.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, she spent a lot of money. It was very comfortable. The family loved sitting in it, but she hated looking at it.
Yeah.
So what I did was to put this really patterned wallpaper on the walls to make it louder than the sectional. This patterned, strong, kind of William Morris type fecund wallpaper that had a lot of botanicals in it, which was so much more interesting to look at than the sectional. When you
Mm.
walked into the space, what you would notice was the wallpaper covering all the walls, that and the sectional receded.
Yeah.
And then I added a rug and made it cozy, and then a round coffee table rather than a big square chunky coffee table,
Yeah.
because that was too much stability. Too much stability, it feels like stagnation. And we
Okay.
all know those homes that you walk into and with a lot of dark, heavy furniture and a lot of brown leather sofas, and there's like a heaviness to the room. That is an overabundance of stability. The coffee table have to be so chunky? Can it be one of those Saarinen coffee tables that are a little lighter, that have more space, more air, more movement to them?
Or something lucite. You talk a lot about, even in small vignettes, about bringing in something that's clear for clarity. It's quite literal.
Yes, literally, because when you people say, I don't know what I want in my life. So in the first step that we work with is owning your desires. And oftentimes it's not even your design desires, it's what do I want in my life? And
Yeah.
people don't know. They're like, I don't know what I want. All I know is I don't want what I have. I always say, okay, so if you don't know, then code your home for clarity. And the way
Mhm.
you code your home for clarity is to take out the complicated shapes, even just remove them and put them in the basement. Have your accessories be like simple shapes, round, square, triangular, simple shapes, not these like overcomplicated shapes. Start removing layers from your home, especially if you're a maximalist. Lean into a little minimalism, even if
Mhm.
it's just part of your home, the bookshelf, and see how that makes you feel. Clear things, glass items and lucite items and resin items where the light could come through. Really start coding the unconscious mind for clarity. Once you start doing that, you begin to clock, like, how is this making me feel? And then how is that affecting the manifestation out in the
Yeah.
world? So it's like you make a move, you see how it makes you feel, part one, and then how it affects the manifestation.
Yes. And all of this aligns so beautifully with one of my principles, which is style evolves, which is about actively, sometimes passively evolving and just allowing life to happen and really sitting back and watching, like you said, like what happens to me in my body and my mind when I make changes. And sometimes it's actively evolving where you are moving things around, you are doing things, you are taking some agency, you are making things happen. And so I just want to point out that Olga isn't saying here that things are going away forever if you're a maximalist. It's just, it might just be for a month, it might be for a week. It just, it's what you need in the moment. And so there's no prescriptive. This is not a prescriptive book. I don't feel like at all. It's very much teaching us how to figure things out about ourselves, how to have conversations with ourselves about ourselves. And I really like it about that. I want to share another example of how design decor choices change how someone was living their life and talk about Nicole. She was living alone after a painful divorce. Tell us about what are the different things you did in her rooms. First of all, you said she was only living in half of it. It's like her partner left and it was like half of her life left. So tell us, what did you do there?
When I came to her home, she couldn't go into the bedroom that she had shared with her partner. She was sleeping on the sofa.
Oh,
She was like in a lot of trauma. She was just grieving and not able to move forward because the home was holding her back.
yeah.
So, what we did rather than buying new things was a pattern disruption. That's what I always recommend. It's like restarting your computer. So, we removed things that reminded her of him and put them out on the street, things that were broken, things that never worked, things that reminded her of any old identities. So
Mm,
that was the first thing that I always tell people before you buy anything, do a big pattern disruption on your home. So you begin to shake the energy up.
yeah.
We moved her from her primary bedroom into the guest room and created this space that didn't remind her of him at all. It was like,
Yeah.
what brings you joy? without needing to buy anything new? How can we just move the things in your home around that you've decided to keep in a way that feels fruitful? And then how do we create a strategy for buying bridge pieces, for
Hmm.
buying pieces that will help you use the whole of your home? So
Hmm.
she moved into the guest room, which she lived in for about 4 months until she felt ready to move back into the primary bedroom.
Okay.
The primary bedroom became like the healing yoga space.
Love
So
it.
we removed all the furniture from it. We put plants in there and we put yoga mats, a soft rug, and a meditation altar. And that's
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
she purified the space for about
Yeah. She
4 months.
reclaimed it, purified it. I love it.
Yeah. And then we decided that she was eating her meals at the kitchen standing up because she didn't
Oh,
really have a dining table. So we got her a small cafe table and put it by the window so she could have her morning coffee there. And
mm,
that started becoming a ritual. So we started thinking, what kind of rituals will give you the most pleasure? Like
mm.
where does your body feel like sitting in your home? And those windows were this underused space, like nothing was in front of them. And then we got this vintage lamp. So that by that point, we started buying things. He was already in a space of claiming her new life. And
And
that's
she'd
when the post
identified what she wanted. She got clear on what she wanted.
Exactly. She
Yeah.
got clear. She did her grieving and she moved on. And when you get a divorce or when you lose a job or when you get a new job or have a new baby or marry someone and mix your two families together, you are in a process of transformation. So those
Mhm.
are the most amazing times to start coding new patterns and seeding new patterns into your home and into your life.
I want to wrap up with thoughts on beauty. And this is how you wrap up the book. It's how I want to wrap up this conversation because I too used to, I don't know, feel like it was like this guilty pleasure, secret pleasure of wanting beauty in my life because, oh, that's so superficial. It's not about needs, it's about wants. When I started the podcast, it was all about trying to understand why does design even matter? Isn't it all just superficial beauty? Of course, I don't believe that, but that's where I was trying to dispel that line of thinking. And you talk about it in really an interesting way. So I want to ask you to explain what you mean when you say beauty plus purpose equals power.
Beauty always draws attention. And wherever attention goes, energy flows, right? So we want to put objects of beauty in specific focal points that begin to draw our attention towards them. So there's this section in the book that I call power objects. And these
Yes.
are objects of really great beauty. And if you put them in specific focal points, for example, if you want more playfulness in your life, say that you're overworked and like overstretched with your family, and you want to bring in the energy of playfulness in your life. I have this example. I actually wanted that in my life. So I bought this really cool basketball that was painted by an artist named Kahinge Wiley. And I put it in a focal point in my office where I looked at it literally. That was what I wanted to bring into my life. So that is the purpose. So
Mhm.
my eye was drawn to the beauty, but the beauty wasn't just beauty, it had a purpose to it. There's beauty everywhere. What kind of beauty? What is the purpose of that beauty?
Right.
That's the question you want to ask yourself. And what energy is this? For example, a cup. A beautiful cup could be a thick, solid terracotta cup, and that's a beautiful cup. Or it could be a light, thin, colored glass, Asian inspired cup. Both are beautiful. Which one do you choose? What energy do you want to drink in your
Yeah.
life?
Yeah,
And
literally.
that's
Right.
power. Once you start coding beauty with a purpose, you step into a greater level of power in your own creatorship, manifestational capacity.
And that's really to put a fine point on it. You talked throughout our conversation about being a creator in your own home. And that is something that I really want to encourage people to get rid of. I'm not creative. I don't have an eye. The act of being creative is innately human. We all have it. This book will help you tap into it. And help you really make the most of your most valuable asset. And I say that even if you're renting. Your space, and you say this in the book, is the thing that you have control over, the one thing you have control over, even if you're renting. Okay, maybe you don't want to put anything on the walls permanently, but how you arrange it, how you adorn it, what you bring in, what you get rid of. Yeah, let's not take that opportunity for granted. Olga, this has been such a great conversation, and I really appreciate you being on the show.
It's been my pleasure. I love talking about this. It's my favorite subject.
Mine too.